So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know who else is trying to fall asleep to the soft horror of history. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes before dawn, teeth clenched from the cold. Your body aches, not just from yesterday's work, but from the hours spent curled under a thin blanket that trapped barely enough heat to keep you alive. The air inside your cottage is thick with frost. Every exhale clouds in front of your face. There's no comfort in staying in bed. Your straw mattress is damp and the wool blanket smells faintly of mildew. You slept in your boots again, not because you forgot, but because you can't afford to take them off. Once cold, they stiffen like boards, and pulling them back on with numb fingers is nearly impossible. You shuffle over to the hearth. The fire's gone out. The coals are black. You kneel, gently stirring the ash, hoping to find a warm ember, just one tiny glow to coax back into life. Nothing. It's dead. So, you begin again. You blow on kindling with lips that are already cracked from dry wind. You pray under your breath. You cough from the soot. You try not to think about how much firewood you've already burned this week, because the stack by the wall is shrinking too fast. And still, your fingers are blue. The first real task of the day is the water. Outside, the well is half frozen. The rope is brittle and the bucket handle has iced over. You tug, wince, and finally lift a container full of slush. It's not clean. You'll have to melt it later, strain it through cloth, and hope it doesn't taste like rust and moss. You're thirsty now, but drinking the slush as is will make your stomach rebel. So you wait. Again, you always wait. Back indoors, your family starts to stir. Your youngest is whimpering softly. They're too cold to cry properly, too hungry to go back to sleep. Your partner pulls them close under the covers, both shivering in silence. The morning doesn't begin with joy or conversation. It begins with the cold and the questions it brings. Do we have enough bread to last the week? Did the goat survive the night? Will the fire last until sundown? It's always a calculation, always a slow-moving crisis. Historians still argue whether medieval winters were truly more brutal than today's. But when you're living it without insulation, without modern medicine, without even decent boots, it doesn't matter. It feels endless. It feels personal. It feels like the cold is hunting you. Your body starts to change in winter. You stop feeling your fingertips as clearly. You move more slowly, not from laziness, but because every movement costs warmth. Your knees click when you stand. Your skin stays damp for days, and your breath always tastes like smoke. Outside, the frost has covered everything like a burial shroud. The path to the barn is a slip hazard. You take it slow. You can't afford to fall. No one's going to fix a broken hip. You reach the barn door and have to kick it open, because it's frozen shut again. Inside, the cow is alive. Barely. She's not standing. She didn't eat much yesterday. You run your hand over her side and feel the ribs beneath her skin. She needs hay, but you're nearly out, and it's only December. Some medieval households brought livestock into their homes to keep them alive during winter. It wasn't just warmth. It was survival, mutual misery. Imagine sleeping beside a goat that smells like a wet blanket and farts like thunder. Welcome to winter luxury. You laugh. A little. But it's hollow. Your boots are soaked now, not with snow, but with melted frost from the barn floor. It creeps into your socks, and you know the skin beneath will go raw. Blisters in winter don't heal. They just turn purple and sting. Sometimes they crack open. Sometimes they don't close at all until spring. And yet, there's no choice but to keep moving. You can't stay still for long, not unless you want to stiffen up like the bucket outside. You chop kindling with frozen fingers, slipping on the handle because your gloves wore out 3 winters ago. Once, a traveling merchant passed through and offered leather mittens. They were soft, warm, waterproof, but the price was ridiculous. 3 chickens. You laughed then. 2, not now. Now you'd give 4. By the time the weak sun rises above the trees, you're already tired. The kind of tired that lives in your bones. Not sleepy, just worn thin by the constant assault of cold. Worry and work, and still. There are animals to feed, ashes to clear, water to boil, children to calm. One scholar once noted that medieval winter was less a season and more a siege, a months-long campaign against the body and mind. No battles, no armor, no sword, just damp socks and endless dark. And the worst part? This is only the beginning. The frost has barely started to bite. You still have January. You still have February, March, if it's cruel. And if you're lucky, only your toes will go numb. The cold doesn't respect boundaries. It doesn't politely knock before entering. It doesn't care that you've crawled inside your cottage for shelter. It seeps through walls, slips through keyholes, rides the draft beneath your door, and settles like smoke across your skin. You may call this place your home, but winter calls it something else, an open invitation. Your house, like most in the village, is made from whatever you could find: wattle and daub, strips of woven wood slathered with a mix of straw, mud, and sometimes animal dung. In theory, it keeps out wind and weather. In reality, it's barely a suggestion of a wall. You can feel the breeze shift directions just by standing in different corners. When it rains, the walls sweat. When it freezes, they groan. And when the wind howls across the moor, your cottage moans right back, boards flexing, straw shuddering, frost creeping inward like it's being drawn by scent. The thatched roof, once your pride, now sags with damp. It was patched in autumn with the good straw, the long pieces that should hold firm. But even the best thatch loses its will in midwinter. The snow settles in waves up there, pushing down, 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 until you wake one morning with a few flakes drifting softly through the rafters onto your face. You laugh, not because it's funny, but because if you don't laugh, you'll cry. There are no real windows in your home, just open slits that let in a sliver of light on short winter days and vast quantities of cold air all night. You've tried to block them with rags or bits of hide when you're lucky. The wind just knocks them aside, like an impatient guest. The door hangs askew. You jam it shut each night with a rock and a prayer, hoping it doesn't blow open while you sleep. There's a noticeable gap near the bottom now, something chewed through it last month. A rat, maybe, or the wind itself. You've learned that in winter, indoors is a fiction. It's just outdoors with thinner wind. But heat has no loyalty. It rises straight up and disappears through the roof hole meant for smoke. Only a thin radius of warmth hugs the flames. Step back 2 feet, and it's as if the fire was never there, and the smoke doesn't always cooperate either. If the wind outside shifts, it forces the smoke downward instead of up and out. Your eyes sting, your throat scratches, you cough until your ribs ache, but you sit there anyway, because the only other option is freezing. Historians still argue whether peasants in winter truly lived in constant cold, or if they managed to stay decently warm with clever design. But when you're living it, clever design feels like a lie someone wrote in a book. You've visited neighbors' cottages, some better, some worse. One man built a second wall inside the first using stacked logs and dried mud. It helped for a while. Then the inner wall collapsed when a rat burrowed through it looking for warmth. Another neighbor dug into the hillside and made their home partially underground. The earth did stay warmer, but it also flooded during a thaw, and they lost 2 goats to the mud. So you patch, you stuff rags into holes, you wedge old sacks under the door. You drape your cloak over the doorway at night, and still, the wind finds you always. You've stopped using the phrase drafty. Drafty implies a breeze. This is a siege. You huddle in corners where the wind is least aggressive. You pull your blanket tighter. You curl your knees to your chest. Still, you shiver. Your body trembles not from fear, but from fatigue, the kind of deep exhaustion that comes when your muscles are clenched all day just to hold in heat. Even your breath betrays you. You exhale, and it turns to mist, then to frost on the wall. You touch it, it's hard, like tiny teeth lining the inside of your home. You wonder, quietly, if frost can grow inward forever. And then you hear it. The roof creaks, not the usual settling wood, but a long, drawn-out moan of protest, the kind of sound that makes you stop breathing. You stare up at the ceiling. You see the bulge where the snow's piled too high. You know what's coming if it keeps building. Last winter, an old man 2 cottages down died in his bed when the rafters gave way. They found him with his arms still crossed over his chest, his eyes wide open, staring at the weight that crushed him. You dream of that sometimes. Quirky fact: in some regions, families kept chickens inside during winter, not for warmth, but because the birds kept laying eggs longer when close to human heat. It worked, but the smell was unbearable. That's why your cousin's place always reeks of feathers and droppings. They say it's worth it. You're not convinced. You'd try it yourself, but your roof is already bowing. 1 chicken might be the tipping point. You glance around your cottage now. The walls glisten with ice. The rags in the window flap lazily. The fire has gone out again. You can't feel your feet, and still, it's only December. You stare at the hearth like it's your enemy. Not because it's done anything wrong, but because it refuses to do anything right. You fed it twigs, you added bark, dry straw, even that last nub of fat wood you'd been saving since All Hallows. And what do you get? A choking ribbon of smoke and a sad orange flicker that dies the moment you blink. This isn't warmth, this is hope on life support. You cough into your sleeve as the smoke curls upward, hits the low rafters, and spills right back into the room. Your eyes water, your lungs rattle. And yet, this smoky, half-dead fire is the only thing standing between your family and frostbite. Fires in winter are less comfort and more compromise. The medieval hearth is open, no chimney, no vent, no clever engineering, just a pit of stone or clay in the center of the room, sometimes lined with bricks, if you're lucky. The smoke is supposed to drift up and out through a hole in the roof, but the wind laughs at architecture. It slaps the smoke back into your face. It drives the flames sideways. It makes your fire act like a petulant child, needy, loud, unreliable, and fuel. Fuel is everything. Fuel is power. Fuel is survival, but it's also running out. You remember the stack of firewood you chopped in October. You were proud of it. You even showed it off to your neighbor, bragged that it would last through Candlemas. It's mid-December now. Half of it's already gone. The logs burned faster than expected. Some were too green, some too soft, and some, the worst ones, smoked like wet moss and refused to catch. Now you're left picking through the pile, choosing the least miserable logs, hoping they don't hiss when you drop them on the coals. Historians estimate that an average medieval household burned through at least 2 to 4 cartloads of wood every winter. That's assuming you have a cart. And woods? And strength. You have none of those things, so you start improvising. Old tools get broken down for kindling. You pull beams from the lean-to. One night, you stare at the stool in the corner and seriously wonder if anyone would notice, if it disappeared. Yesterday, you burned part of a broken yoke. The iron fittings were still attached. They hissed and popped in the fire like angry insects. You don't care. It gave you 6 minutes of warmth. You're not alone in this, either. You've heard stories, some funny, some not, of villagers burning anything that caught flame. Carts, fence posts, even floorboards. One man dug up an old coffin from the churchyard and fed it into his hearth, laughing that the dead wouldn't mind sharing. The priest did. Quirky fact, in some monasteries, the rules stated that fires were only allowed in certain rooms and at specific hours to preserve discipline. That meant monks often studied, ate, and even prayed with their fingers shaking and their lips turning blue. Sanctity, it seems, wasn't immune to frost. You think of that sometimes when you watch your children huddle near the fire like moths, reaching out tiny hands toward a warmth that barely exists. They whisper in hushed tones. One is coughing, another keeps scratching at her scalp. You know what that means. Lice again. The cold doesn't kill them, it just makes them slower, sneakier. You pull your youngest onto your lap, wrap your cloak around her twice, and rock gently. Her skin is clammy, not from heat, but from the way cold sweat clings when the body fights too hard to stay warm. The fire sputters, the logs pop, a new breeze slices in through the roof vent, and just like that, the smoke doubles back into the room, thick and angry. You all cough together, it's almost comical, like a family chorus of misery. There's soot on your ceiling beams now, a fine dusting of black that settles on everything. Your walls are streaked with it, especially above the hearth. The whitewash you applied in the summer is long gone, swept away by heat, smoke, and despair. Even your food tastes of smoke now. Bread, smoky. Dried meat, smoky. Water boiled in a soot-blackened pot, smoky. There's no escape. And then there's the smell. The house reeks of burnt pine, boiled wool, animal hair, and human sweat. You don't even notice it anymore. But when a visitor enters, rare as that is, they flinch. You're not offended. You just envy their nose. There's a debate among scholars about whether medieval people truly disliked the smell of smoke. Some say they were used to it. Others argue that it was a necessary evil they tolerated, not embraced. Either way, you'd give anything for a window that opens. But you can't afford complaints. Not when your fingers are still raw from chopping yesterday's bundle of kindling. Not when your left thumb has gone numb again. Not when the dog won't leave the fire even to eat, curled into a tight circle, eyes open, tail twitching in her sleep. You try fanning the flames again, gently, with a palm full of breath. The fire brightens for a second. A warm pulse spreads to your knuckles. Then it dies back down to a low, resentful glow. You think about dragging in more wood, but the pile outside is under snow. Wet logs don't burn, they just hiss, blacken, and taunt you. You'll have to bring them in and stack them beside the hearth for a day or two. Let them thaw. That means even more smoke tomorrow. The irony, of course, is that the fire will kill you if you're not careful. Too much smoke and you'll choke in your sleep. Not enough warmth, and your heart slows down like a tired engine. You walk that line every night, too hot, and the cottage burns, too cold, and you freeze. You don't trust the fire, not anymore, but you need it, because winter isn't a season, it's an enemy, and this little wheezing hearth of yours is the only soldier on your side. You don't think of water the way someone in the modern world might. There's no turning a tap, no glass of clean liquid sitting calmly on a nightstand, waiting to be sipped. Here in winter, water becomes an adversary, slippery, solid, unreliable. It vanishes when you need it, reappears where you don't, and refuses to behave. This morning, the bucket outside has frozen solid again. You know this before you even see it, because your breath feels drier and your lips have cracked. You try to crack the ice with your boot heel, but it barely chips. So you bring the whole thing inside, set it near the hearth, and wait. You're always waiting for something to melt. If it's snow you're using, and often it is, then your patience stretches even thinner. You scoop it up in handfuls, drop it into a pot, and watch as it shrinks down to a useless puddle. What looks like a pot full of snow becomes half a cup of cold, dirty water, and you do it again, and still. You're thirsty. Winter water, ironically, feels like a kind of scarcity. There's snow everywhere, and yet it's completely useless until melted, filtered, and boiled. That means more wood burned, more smoke in the house, more time spent crouched by the fire, hoping the steam rises. And then there's food. You open the storage chest, your pantry, and stare at what remains. 2 wheels of cheese, hardened like bricks, a few onions, already sprouting pale green threads, a tiny sack of flour you swore was heavier last week, and at the bottom, wrapped in cloth and hope, a hunk of dried meat with a smell you try not to think about too hard. Your meals now are predictable: porridge, onion broth, bread that threatens to chip a tooth. You've learned to soak the crusts in water first, or in milk if you're lucky, but milk's a summer dream. The goat hasn't given anything for weeks. Historians estimate that the average medieval family stored enough grain to last through the cold months, but only if harvests were good. Rats were few, and nothing went moldy. All 3 conditions rarely aligned. So you ration, you eat less, you chew slower, you tell the kids, we'll eat well next Sunday, even though you know you said that last week too. And still, some things spoil. Quirky fact? In certain regions, people believed that hanging salted meat over bundles of herbs in the rafters would keep it preserved longer. You tried it, turns out. The herbs didn't stop the mice. One day you reached up and pulled down nothing but bone dust and a piece of string. The mice aren't even afraid anymore. You hear them at night, scratching behind the storage crates. Once, you saw one drag an entire piece of stale bread under the floorboards. It moved faster than you've seen your own kids run. You'd be furious if you weren't a little impressed. Your drinking water sits in a ceramic jug by the fire, constantly watched like a newborn. If it freezes, the jug cracks. If it stays warm too long, it grows cloudy. You can't win. You just try to keep it less dangerous than the alternatives. And yes, there are alternatives. The pond by the edge of the forest hasn't fully frozen yet, so sometimes you trudge through the snow to chip off a corner and fill a barrel. It's heavy work, and it leaves your arms shaking. You bring it home, strain it through cloth, and boil it. That's the plan, anyway. Sometimes you're too tired, and you just hope the frost has killed whatever's living in it. It hasn't. You learned that the hard way last year when your middle child spent 2 days with fever and diarrhea, curled up in a corner near the fire, shivering and moaning. You thought she wouldn't make it. You prayed harder than you ever had. She did survive, but now you boil everything. No shortcuts, no gambles. You've seen what happens. And even when food doesn't spoil, it finds other ways to turn against you. Dried beans that never soften. Roots that go soft in the center but look fine on the outside. Cheese that tastes of ash because it shared a shelf with your firewood. And sometimes, things freeze you weren't expecting. One night, you left the pot of stew too close to the outer wall. By morning, it was a solid block. You tried to reheat it, but the fire wasn't strong enough. So you spent half the day chipping it out like an archaeological dig. Dinner was late, the stew was gritty. You don't complain out loud anymore. Complaints take energy. They also bounce off the walls and come back colder. Instead, you mutter, or sigh, or just stop talking altogether. Your mouth tastes like smoke and iron. You chew ice more often than you realize. You watch your dog gnaw at an old bone near the door and wonder if she's getting more nutrition than you. She probably is. She's clever enough to sneak scraps from the compost pile, which now freezes into a gray block every night. You once saw her licking a patch of snow that had blood in it, probably from a rabbit. You didn't stop her. You just watched, almost envious. Scholars still debate whether food scarcity in winter was more lethal than cold itself. The records are inconsistent, but in your bones, you already know the answer. Hunger doesn't wait for logic. It waits for nothing. And that's the part they don't always talk about in the stories. It's not just freezing. It's freezing while hungry, while thirsty, while your belly growls and your teeth ache and your tongue feels like dry leather. You stare at the remains of your dried meat. You cut off the green bit. You sniff. You chew. You swallow. You don't die today, but you won't call it food. Not really, because in winter, food and water stop being nourishment. They become math, and you're always coming up short. Your clothes are lying to you. They look thick. They seem layered, you think. Surely this much fabric must keep me warm. But it's a trick. It's always a trick. Because everything you own is damp, and everything damp in winter turns cold, stiff, and eventually deadly. You've stopped hoping for anything to fully dry. Laundry, once wet, becomes a kind of permanent condition. Your cloak, woolen, patched 3 times at the hem, smells like mildew and smoke. The tunic beneath it sticks to your back like wet bark. Your undergarments haven't seen true dryness since Michaelmas. And don't even ask about your socks. This morning, you reached for the pile of clothes by the hearth and found that they'd frozen overnight. Not all of them, just the ones you were counting on. The shirt you wore while splitting firewood, the gloves you'd hoped to rotate, the children's blanket you tried to wash 2 days ago, still stiff and sour. In summer, you could hang things outside and let the sun do the work. Now, you hang clothes by the fire, and they absorb smoke like bread absorbs broth after a few hours. They feel less wet, not dry, never dry, just less wet. You've developed tricks. You stuff rags inside your boots to keep the damp from settling into your toes. You warm your socks between your thighs before putting them on. You sleep with tomorrow's clothes under your blanket so they're not completely icy at dawn. None of it works. Not really. The worst part is the moment just before dressing. You peel off one damp layer only to wriggle into another. Your skin, raw from days of rubbing against coarse wool, protests. You wince. Your breath hitches, but you keep moving, because stillness means cold, and cold means pain. There's a constant rubbing now, fabric against skin, moisture against warmth, friction against fatigue. The result? Rashes, blisters, cracked skin that oozes, then crusts over, then splits again. Your thighs sting when you walk. Your underarms burn when you stretch. Your shoulders have permanent red lines from that same scratchy cloak strap. Historians still argue how many layers the average medieval person actually wore. Some sources describe peasants in 3 or 4 layers of linen and wool. Others suggest far fewer. Due to cost, what they agree on. Wool was the standard, and wet wool is a uniquely cruel thing. It holds moisture like a sponge. It scratches like nettles, and once it gets cold, it stays cold. You remember once finding a patch of fur-lined cloth in the market? It was fox, soft and dark and warm to the touch. You ran your fingers across it, imagining what it would feel like wrapped around your neck. Then you looked at the price. 2 whole silver pennies. You put it down. You've regretted that choice every winter since. Quirky fact. Some villagers used to line their cloaks with moss or straw for insulation. You tried that once. The straw poked holes through the seam, and the moss rotted after 3 days. The smell haunted you for a week. So now you just layer undergarment, tunic, overdress, cloak, belt everything tightly so the air doesn't sneak in. Tie strips of cloth around your wrists and ankles. Stuff more fabric around your neck. You waddle instead of walk. You creak when you sit, and still, you are cold. Not surface cold, deep cold. A kind of chill that settles behind your ribs and whispers that your body is losing the fight. You've stopped trying to warm your hands with breath. It's useless. You keep them in your armpits now, switching sides every few minutes. You remember the saying, "A frozen body burns no wood." It means dead people don't need fuel. It's not a comforting proverb. One of the worst moments is returning home after work. Your clothes, already wet with snow and sweat, turn icy the moment you stop moving. They stiffen, they squeeze, they dig into your skin like frozen rope. You strip them off fast as you can, but it's never fast enough. You always lose a bit of feeling in your fingertips. The children don't fare better. Their clothes are hand-me-downs from cousins and neighbors, ill-fitting, frayed, too short or too tight. They get red rashes where boots rub. They cry when you force on the stiff linen shirts that never dry. Once, your youngest started to sob just from the cold touch of a half-damp tunic. You wrapped him in your cloak and pressed your back to the hearth for an hour. It barely helped. Lice thrive in winter, hiding in seams and hoods. They love warmth, but not too much. Just enough to nest in the neck folds of a tired child. You boil the clothes when you can, but firewood is precious, so most days you scratch. There's no real concept of clean, just not as dirty as yesterday. You rotate garments by which ones smell least offensive. You share cloaks. You dry gloves over the same fire that cooks your porridge. You sometimes dream of a single piece of clothing that doesn't hurt. A cloak that drapes instead of chafes. A tunic that warms instead of scratches. A pair of boots that don't leak or trap ice at the heel. But those are dreams. Your real boots, patched leather, lined with rags, crusted in salt, rub the same raw spots on your ankles every time you walk more than a mile. You've tried stuffing moss in there. It froze. You tried wrapping strips of cloth. They slipped. So now you just limp, and always, beneath the stink and the smoke and the wool and the wet, is the ache. The ache of being cold in your bones. No matter what you wear, you sit beside the hearth, arms crossed tightly, and watch the steam rise from your sleeves as the snow melts from your shoulders. You'd cry if your tears didn't freeze halfway down your cheeks, because in winter, even your clothes betray you. You've forgotten what it feels like to be clean, not just surface clean, like wiping mud off your boots or brushing crumbs off your lap. You mean truly clean, fresh skin, warm water, soft cloth, air that smells like herbs and open windows. That kind of clean belongs to summer, to the rich, to memory. Because in winter, bathing is not routine, it's a risk. To undress in this cold is to gamble with your body. You stand near the hearth, trembling with a pitcher of half-boiled water. Steam rising like a ghost from the basin. You dip a cloth in, wring it out with shaking fingers, and press it to your neck. Your body jolts like it's been punched. Your skin burns, not from heat, but from contrast, ice inside, warmth outside. You grit your teeth and keep going. Neck, armpits, chest. You wipe fast. You never linger. Every second uncovered is a chance for cold to seep deeper into your core. You tried bathing fully once, stripping down, scrubbing properly. You thought maybe it would help your joints, your cough, your mood. But the room wasn't warm enough. You slipped on the wet floor, and when you got into bed afterward, you couldn't stop shaking for hours. You don't try again, so now you wash in parts. A damp cloth here, a rinse there. You sprinkle dried lavender in the basin to make yourself feel better. The smell fades fast, overwhelmed by smoke and damp wool. The kids are harder. They hate it. They scream at the cold. They wriggle out of your reach. You threaten. You beg. You manage to wash their faces, their feet. That's it. Your partner doesn't fare much better. The two of you avoid each other most nights, not out of malice, but out of shared exhaustion. Your bodies stink. Your clothes scratch. You sleep facing opposite walls, each cocooned in a personal bubble of discomfort. And the worst of it? You can smell winter people. You enter a neighbor's home and it hits you immediately. Smoke, sweat, old onions, wet fur. It's the same in your own house, but you're nose blind to it now. Every person carries it on their sleeves, in their hair, under their nails. The communal stew of survival. Historians still argue how often medieval people truly bathed. Some say once a week, others suggest once a season. Some cities had bathhouses, yes, but not for you, not out here. And even those closed in winter, when keeping water liquid became more trouble than it was worth. Quirky fact, in some parts of Europe, people believed that hot water opened the skin and let sickness in, so winter bathing was seen as dangerous. Better to be dirty than dead. You're starting to believe it. The basin you use is cracked on one side. You plug the gap with beeswax. It leaks anyway. The floor beneath it is always wet now, and a fine sheet of ice forms every night. You step in it by accident sometimes, barefoot, and hiss like a kicked cat. Once, you tried heating water with stones. You placed smooth rocks in the fire, then dropped them into the bucket. It sizzled impressively. And for a moment, the warmth made you feel clever. Then the rock split with a bang, sending scalding droplets into your face. You still have a scar on your chin. Now you heat water slowly, and you never trust it. Your hair is tangled. You brush it dry when you can, mostly with your fingers. Combs break. Your scalp itches constantly. You know lice are back. They never really leave. You boil your hat sometimes. That helps. But the stench of wet wool cooked over fire is not something you recommend. You've become adept at spot washing, scrubbing stains from under your nails with bits of straw, rinsing your socks in near frozen water and wearing them damp, just to get a day's use, rubbing your feet with ashes when they smell too bad to sleep. But true bathing, with warm water, soft cloth, time to dry, that's the stuff of dreams. And the funny thing is, your standards have slipped without you noticing. Last week, you caught a whiff of your neighbor as he passed, and you flinched. Then you realized you probably smelled worse. You shrugged and kept walking. Your friend Marta once told you she hadn't washed her back in 4 months. You laughed until you realized you hadn't either. No one judges. Everyone stinks. The pigs, the people, the smoke, they all mix into a single winter perfume. Your bed is no help. The linens haven't been washed since early autumn. You meant to change them. Then the rains came. Then the firewood ran low. Then the washing tub cracked. Then you just stopped caring. You wrap yourself in blankets that carry your scent, your sweat, your breath. You sleep in a stew of your own making, sometimes. You dream of rivers, of plunging into water so cold it burns, then emerging clean, hair dripping, skin new. But those are just dreams, because here, in winter, bathing is a privilege. Cleanliness is a risk, and the only thing you wash regularly is your hands. And only when they're covered in blood or soot. You sit by the hearth now, basin cooling beside you, and wring out a rag. You touch it to your face. It stings. It always stings. And you whisper, without meaning to, "That'll do." You smell yourself before you see yourself. There's no mirror in the house. Nothing reflective enough to catch more than a shadowy blur. But you don't need one. You know exactly what you look like. because you can smell what you've become. It clings to you. It wraps around your shoulders, settles into your skin, and lingers in the fabric of everything you own. The scent is impossible to escape, because it's not just on the surface, it's soaked in. It is you now, and it's not just you, it's everyone, it's everything. The moment you open your front door after a long day, it hits you like a wall, this thick, stale cloud of wool sweat, smoked meat, old onions, fire ash, wet fur, chamber pot steam, and feet. It's the smell of people trapped indoors for months with no baths, no breeze, and no hope of fresh air. You wince, then you shrug, then you close the door behind you and get on with the day. Your home smells like survival and all the bodily functions, compromises, and desperate shortcuts that come with it. The rushes on the floor are months old. You were supposed to change them with the seasons, fresh cut and laced with herbs to mask odors, but it's winter. The herbs are gone. The rushes are rotting beneath them. The dirt floor has turned soft in some corners, then frozen. You light a small fire and the smoke doesn't rise. It pools, lazy and sluggish, spreading across the ceiling like a dark breath. The smoke carries its own stench, soot, wet bark, dung from the fire starters you scavenged last week. The room thickens. Your eyes sting, but you sit down anyway. What choice do you have? Everything here smells like something else. The table smells like last week's stew. The wool blankets smell like the dog. The dog smells like the goat, and the goat, who's now living inside with you to keep from freezing to death, smells like the barn floor on a rainy day. She's not alone. A few chickens sleep in the corner under a bent stool, their feathers puffed out, beaks tucked under wings. One of them hasn't moved in 2 days. You try not to look. Quirky fact? In especially harsh winters, peasants didn't just bring animals into the house. They let them share sleeping areas. A warm cow was better than a cold mattress. It made for noisy nights, but quiet funerals. And so the house becomes a barn, and the barn becomes a body. And the body begins to forget what clean smells like. You haven't bathed properly since the last frost, and that was a shallow bucket, a rag, and 30 seconds of cursing through chattering teeth. Since then, it's been cloth wipes and hopeful prayers. Your armpits are raw. Your feet are always wet. Your scalp itches with something that's probably alive. You scratch and sniff without thinking, then cringe when the smell reaches your nose. Your clothes are worse. The wool tunic has been worn every day for weeks. It's been smoked, sweated in, spilled on, and slept in. You try to hang it near the fire sometimes to air it out, but all that does is bake the smell deeper into the fibers. Even your breath smells sour. You caught a whiff of it on your hand the other day after coughing. Sharp, faintly sweet, like something fermenting. You drank some snow to wash it away. It didn't help. Historians often debate how medieval people dealt with body odor. Some records suggest that they were simply used to it, that clean was a different concept back then. Others insist that people tried harder than we think, rubbing herbs on their skin, chewing mint leaves, boiling laundry in ash water. You think it's both true and false? Yes, people noticed. But no, they didn't always have the means or energy to fix it, especially not in winter. Even your bed has a smell now, a sour human smell. You've changed the straw once this season, and even then only because you had to. Something had died in it. A mouse, maybe, or a rat. You never found it, just the scent. The blankets are worse, heavy with moisture. They've soaked up weeks of breath, sweat, and smoke. You pulled one over your face last night, trying to warm your nose, and immediately regretted it. Your children no longer complain. That's the most worrying part. They used to wrinkle their noses, ask for a bath, beg for mint to chew. Now they just curl up like dogs and sleep through it. They smell like earth, like wet rope, like growing things trapped in the dark. You keep the chamber pot near the hearth to stop it from freezing. That means the whole room smells faintly of what it holds. You empty it when you remember, when you can. But the latrine outside is frozen shut, and the wind bites through your cloak before you even reach the door. Sometimes you just pour it out back, where the snow is already stained yellow and brown from dozens of similar decisions. It will thaw in spring. You'll deal with it then. Your neighbor Marta came by this morning. She brought a sack of turnips. You gave her half a loaf of bread. She sat by the fire, peeled off one of her outer cloaks, and laughed when she noticed the same stain on her knees as on yours. Soot mixed with goat hair. "Smells like home," she said. Neither of you laughed. You opened the window slit for 5 minutes, hoping the cold would chase out the stench. It did, briefly, but it chased out the warmth too. You shut it, cursed under your breath, and watched the air settle back into its usual stew. Scholars describe medieval winter life as close, meaning physically cramped, socially intimate, and atmospherically thick. That's one way to put it. Another is, everything smells like it's about to rot, and still, there's no escaping it. You don't get to step out for fresh air, not when stepping out means losing feeling in your fingers. So, you stay, you breathe, you live in the smell. Because in this season, this age, and this body, there is no fresh, only less foul. You lie down in your straw mattress, pull the smoke-worn blanket to your chin, and inhale. You wish you didn't, but you do. And the worst part, you fall asleep anyway. The goat is dying. You see it before you even step inside. The way her legs stretch stiff across the straw, the unnatural stillness in her ribcage, the frozen cloud of breath that doesn't come. For a moment you think maybe she's just sleeping. You whisper her name. No response. You crouch next to her and press your hand against her side. No rise, no warmth. You press again, harder now, hoping you'll feel something, anything, a twitch, a groan, the shift of a muscle. But there's nothing. She's gone. You lower your head, not in prayer, in exhaustion. You hadn't planned to lose the goat. She was your best one, gave good milk all last summer. She followed you like a dog and let the children braid flowers into her fur. In the fall, you swore you'd keep her warm enough. You even brought her inside on the coldest nights, wrapped her in old cloaks, shared your fire. But none of it was enough. And now, she lies here on the floor beside the door, stiff, useless, and heavy in more ways than one. Because she wasn't just a goat, she was food, she was warmth, she was a living asset in a season when everything else dies. Your youngest tugs at your tunic. Will we eat her? You pause. Yes. You say quietly, we have to. You don't say the rest. And we'll eat fast, before the meat spoils in the thaw or freezes too hard to cut. And you'll help hold the legs, and you'll help gut her, because I can't do it alone anymore. The children nod. They're old enough now. They've seen worse, but not much worse. The barn has become a tomb. What once smelled of hay and leather and warm breath now stinks of mold, manure, and death. The straw on the floor is frozen in place, stuck to the ground like old bread to a hearthstone. You shovel it out in clumps. But where do you put it? The compost pile is buried under snow. The field is frozen solid, so you stack it outside the door. It freezes overnight. In the morning, it's a wall of filth inside the barn. The cow lies splayed out, breathing shallowly. She hasn't stood in 2 days. Her hips are chafed from rubbing against the wooden rails. Her eyes are watery, unfocused. You rub her neck, whisper to her. She doesn't respond. She gave no milk this morning, none yesterday either. She's next. Your heart sinks. Historians speak of livestock as a measure of wealth. Cattle for meat, and power. Goats and sheep for milk and wool. Pigs for fat. But they don't always talk about the terror of watching those assets fail one by one under the relentless assault of cold. Livestock don't just drop dead. They go slowly. They grow lethargic. They slip on icy floors, injure themselves, grow fevers. Their breath gets wheezy. They stop eating. They lie down and never get back up. And you watch, you feed, you hope, and you try not to think of what you'll lose next. Quirky fact? In some alpine regions, peasants used to sleep above their animals during winter, the warmth from the cattle rising through slats in the floor. It worked, but it also meant sleeping to the sounds of snorting, farting, and hooves shifting all night. You would trade anything for that setup now. Your barn's roof sags in the middle. The beams creak every time snow lands on top. You check it daily, pushing up with a stick, knocking snow down in dangerous chunks. You nearly got crushed last week doing it. A mound of slush dropped straight onto your shoulder, and you couldn't move your arm for an hour. You laugh now, but it's bitter. The chickens, what's left of them, are silent. They huddle together in a box near the back wall. One of them froze in her sleep 2 nights ago, beak tucked under wing, eyes closed. You found her stiff as a board, still warm underneath from the others' bodies. You buried her under the manure pile. She deserved more. You wish you could let them inside, but the goat took the last corner, took past tense. You haul her out now, dragging her body over frozen mud. You rest halfway, gasping. She's heavier than she looks. You bring her to the shed. That's where the butchering happens now. You've set up hooks, scraped a flat place in the frozen dirt. You don't even flinch at the blood anymore. It's just warmth that left the body. Inside, your partner is boiling snow in the iron pot. You give them a look. They know what it means. They nod and start getting the knives. You say nothing. You try not to cry. You think about the day you first brought that goat home. You'd traded a half sack of grain and your last pair of wool gloves. You named her on the walk back, something silly, something the kids laughed at. Now she's meat. Now she's the difference between 2 more days with food, or not. You remember your neighbor, old Bram, who lost his cow last January. He refused to slaughter it. He just left it, couldn't bring himself to do it. He starved before spring. They found him curled up in the stall beside her. You won't let that happen. You won't let that happen. Scholars still debate whether winter livestock loss was as devastating as famine. The truth? They were often the same thing. No animals meant no milk, no traction, no hides, no dung for fuel. No animals meant no future. And in this house, you're already down a goat. The cow's failing. The chickens are dwindling. You light a second fire in the shed. You begin sharpening the knife. The dog watches you from the door, eyes calm, tail still. She knows, because in winter, the barn isn't just a place for animals. It's where hope goes to freeze. The hunger doesn't arrive like a storm. It seeps in, quiet, polite at first. A skipped meal here, a smaller portion there. You tell yourself you're saving food for later, that it's temporary, that you'll feel full tomorrow, but then tomorrow comes, and you're still hungry, hungrier. Even then it stops being about later. Then it becomes about endurance. You sit down to supper and find that the pot holds more broth than substance. The children don't complain. That's how you know it's serious. When they go quiet, when they stop asking for more, when they just stare into their bowls as if hoping to see something new appear, that's when the cold in your belly turns sharp. Tonight's meal, a few pieces of carrot, a chunk of something you're pretty sure used to be pork, and water boiled with onion peelings. You stretch it with a handful of barley. It thickens a little. Not much. The children eat slowly. You taught them to chew each bite at least 20 times. Not for manners, but to trick the stomach into thinking it's full. You eat last. You scrape the pot, You lick the spoon. You go to bed still hungry. And this isn't a one-night thing. This is the new normal. You remember when you first took inventory back in November. You were careful, precise. You counted sacks of grain, jars of lard, the last few wheels of hard cheese tucked up into the rafters. You measured out the dried beans, the onions, the last preserved roots in the pit. You thought it would be enough. You always think it'll be enough. And then winter laughs, because one sack split open. Rats got in. One batch of grain turned black with mold. The cows stopped giving milk early. The goat died. The meat you salted didn't dry properly. It's soft and smells faintly of sour earth. You're still eating it. What choice do you have? Historians use phrases like precarious food security when describing the medieval poor, but that doesn't quite capture what it feels like to stare into an empty barrel with a bowl in your hand and nothing left to scoop. You've seen weevils in the flour, little brown dots that wriggle when you stir. You don't bother picking them out anymore. They're not poison. They're just extra. The bread you make now is hard enough to crack a tooth. You soak it in snowmelt or thin broth until it softens, if you can call it soft. There was a day last week when the stew was so thin. Your daughter asked if you'd forgotten to add the food. You told her you were making fasting stew, something monks used to eat. She nodded solemnly. She didn't know you'd already boiled the same bones 3 times. Your partner suggested catching rats, said they've been eating better than you. You laughed at first, then stopped laughing. You've seen Marta do it, set traps by the shed, skin them, roast them over the fire like sparrows. She salts the tails, says they taste like eel. Now they just sit near the hearth, legs pulled in, eyes hollow. You caught your eldest chewing on a leather strap the other day. He said he was just pretending. You nodded. You understood. Your dreams are starting to turn cruel. Last night you dreamed of a feast. Warm bread, steaming pies, roasted duck with crackling skin. You could smell it. You reached out, then woke up chewing your own sleeve. Your neighbor told you they found frozen apples behind the church, half rotten and bird-pecked. She brought them home, peeled away the mush, and stewed the rest with water and lard. She said it tasted like something from another life. You were jealous. You've begun hiding food, even from your own family. A crust here, a strip of dried onion there. It shames you. But you can't stop. You need the security of something tucked away. Once, you hid a biscuit in your boot, forgot it was there. When you found it days later, it was soft with sweat and lint. You ate it anyway. Your partner doesn't talk about hunger, but you see the way they look at the cupboard, the way they run a finger along the inside of the pot after serving. You're all pretending. Pretending you're not starving. Pretending the next sack of flour is just around the corner. Pretending spring will come in time. But deep down, you know what this is. This is the edge. This is the place where decisions become difficult, where pride bends, where desperation rises like smoke and hunger becomes the only thing anyone can think about. And yet, you still get up in the morning, you still boil water, you still count the beans, because what else can you do? You're not starving yet, not fully, not today, but the pantry's gone hollow, and your body is beginning to understand what that really means. You open the door, and the snow immediately tries to push you back inside, not as a gentle drift, not as a picturesque flutter. No, this is snow with purpose. It slams into your face in a gust so sharp it feels like being pelted with ground glass. You grunt, turn your shoulder against it, and lean forward like a soldier pushing into enemy lines. Because that's exactly what this is. The enemy has arrived, and it is white. The wind howls like a living thing. It grabs at your cloak, pulls your hood back, slices through every seam of your clothing. The snow doesn't fall down. It flies sideways. It rides the wind like 1,000 tiny knives. You squint, but your eyelashes crust with ice in seconds. You pause on the threshold, hand gripping the doorframe, trying to decide whether what you need outside is worth this. It is. It has to be. The path to the barn vanished last night. You shove your boot into a knee-high drift and feel nothing but soft resistance. The snow is light on top, packed like stone beneath. You lift one leg, stomp down, lift the other. You repeat this awkward march like a drunken stork, wobbling as you go, arms out to balance. You had a path once, hard-packed, marked with wooden stakes, but the storm 2 nights ago buried the markers and made your footsteps a memory. You tried clearing it yesterday with a shovel. That shovel now sits under 1/2 meter of new powder. You won't be finding it anytime soon. The barn looms ahead, a vague shape through the white. You count your steps. 1, 2, 3. You keep going. 16, 17, on 22. Your boot catches on something hard. You pitch forward into the snow with a muted thump. It doesn't hurt, not really. Snow is soft, until it freezes. This part is soft. The problem is getting back up. Your arms sink, your knees sink, and now you're floundering like an upended beetle, trying to find leverage on a surface that gives way with every shove. You finally roll, gasp, crawl upright, panting like you just ran for miles. You wipe your face and realize you're soaked. Face, gloves, chest, all soaked. You haven't even reached the barn yet. And this is just an average morning. Snow has made everything harder. Every movement, every chore, every breath. You can't haul water without dragging a sled. You can't gather wood without digging. You can't go to the privy without risking a fall. Yesterday, your neighbor's daughter slipped and hit her head on a frozen bucket. She lay in the snow for an hour before someone found her. She won't wake up now. They say she's resting. You don't ask questions. Historians call winter snow in the Middle Ages a natural barrier. That's a nice term for a death trap. Your barn's door is crusted over. You hack at it with a stick until it creaks open. Inside, it's dark, quieter, but not warm. The animals look up slowly. They don't make a sound. They've stopped protesting. Even the cow, who used to groan for hay, lies silent now, frost on her eyelashes. The chickens huddle in a corner. One of them doesn't move. You don't check. Not right away. Instead, you go to the back, check the roof beams. One is sagging. You press your hand against the wood. It's damp, swollen. The snow on top is melting slightly from trapped heat, then refreezing overnight. The weight is growing. The barn groans softly like an old man in his sleep. You know what's coming. You saw it last winter, Bram's barn. The roof split in the middle of the night. Snow poured in like water. He lost a cow and 3 pigs. He never rebuilt it, couldn't. You shovel what you can. Push the snow out with your arms. Grab a board to brace the beam. It's all temporary. You're buying time. Nothing more. On your way out, you notice the dead chicken. You pick her up by the legs. She's still flexible. Recently gone. You set her aside. That's tomorrow's stew. The wind hits you even harder on the return trip. You'd swear it's stronger, like it knows you've weakened. The snow blows across your eyes again. You lose your bearings for a moment. You turn, see nothing but white. Your heart jumps. You know your own yard like your hands, but now you can't even find the shed. Quirky fact, in some medieval towns, people tied ropes between buildings during blizzards so they could find their way between the house and the stable without getting lost. You remember laughing at that. Now you wish you had rope. You guess? You stumble. You trip over a drift and fall again. Hands buried in cold, you scream, more in frustration than pain, and force yourself upright. There's the house, the roof line, the chimney. You make a beeline for it, legs trembling. When you finally slam the door shut behind you, it echoes through the room like thunder. The kids look up. Your partner moves toward you. You're breathing hard. Snow melts down your collar. There's a moment, somewhere between midnight and dawn, when the fire dims just enough to wake you. Not with noise, not even with light, but with cold. A creeping cold that brushes your face, your fingertips, the exposed tip of your nose. You don't sit up at first. You lie there, eyes open in the dark, listening to the silence of a dying hearth. You know what it means. The fire is nearly out. You reach over, hand trembling, and touch the edge of the clay hearth. Barely warm. You feel around for a stick of wood and find only ash. The last piece must have burned through in the night. You didn't hear it. You slept too hard. Or maybe you were just too tired to wake. You sit up now, breath fogging, and scan the room. The kindling basket is empty. The main pile, what's left of it, is 3 small sticks, some bark, and 1 damp knot of spruce. You stare at it for a long time. You were saving that knot for tomorrow, but it is tomorrow, and your fire is gone. This is how it happens. Not with a blaze, not with drama, but with slow, quiet depletion. 1 log, then another, 1 broken chair leg, 1 door hinge removed so the frame can be fed to the flames. One day you have a wood pile. The next, you're burning the furniture. And after that, well, after that, you start looking at the house differently. You thought you'd chopped enough. Everyone thinks that. You spent weeks in autumn gathering, splitting, stacking. You counted the logs. You watched the leaves fall, felt the wind turn sharp, and said, "This year, we're ready." You weren't. Historians like to calculate how many cords of wood a family needed to survive the winter, usually 2 to 4, depending on the size of the home and the region. That's assuming you live somewhere with dry wood, good tools, and no accidents. You had none of those things. Your axe was dull. Your gloves had holes. The snow came early, and the stack, once proud and tall, burned faster than you ever imagined. Quirky fact? In parts of medieval Scandinavia, people built entire homes with walls made from split logs, knowing full well they'd start taking pieces out of the structure by February. They didn't even pretend it was permanent. It was firewood disguised as shelter. You understand that now. You stand slowly, joints stiff from cold, and toss the spruce knot into the ashes. It hisses, spits sap, and starts to smoke. Not fire, just smoke. You breathe it in anyway. You need more wood. You step outside, boots crunching through frost, and head to the woodshed. What used to be a woodshed, anyway. Now it's an empty frame with walls so thin the snow blew right in. You brush aside the frozen tarp, find 2 logs that might still burn, and 1 that's soaked through. You drag them back inside like stolen treasure. And for what? An hour of heat? 2. If you're lucky, your hands are trembling by the time you get the fire going again. Your partner stirs in the bed behind you, pulls the blanket higher, doesn't speak. You don't either. There's nothing to say. Later, when the sun rises, if it rises, you'll go looking again. You'll scour the yard for anything dry. Fence posts, half-buried branches, the handle of that broken rake, the old shelf that held the grain jars. You've already burned the door to the chicken coop. The chickens don't notice. They're too cold to wander anyway. The bench you made with your father, years ago, burned it last week. Sat by the fire and watched the legs curl, blacken, fall. You didn't tell anyone what it was. You just said, "Good oak," and moved on. You're making trades now. 2. Your neighbor has dry kindling. You gave him half a sack of flour. He said it wasn't a fair deal. You both laughed. Fair doesn't exist anymore. Only warm exists. You've even started burning things that don't burn well. Green wood, peat bricks, dried dung from the animals. You gather it from the barn, press it into cakes, dry it by the fire, and toss it in. The smell is terrible, bitter, earthy, acrid. But the heat? It's real. You used to gag. Now you barely notice. The kids asked where the table went. You told them it broke. That was technically true. It broke when you split it into 3 chunks and threw them on the fire to make soup. You've begun to eye the rafters. Not the main ones yet, but the little supports. The parts that maybe, you can live without. You calculate, always calculating. If I burn this, will the wall hold? If I take this shelf, can I use the nails again later? If I feed the fire now, will we need less soup tonight? Your whole life has become math. Math and wood and timing, and always. There's the fear of what comes next. You remember the story of a woman from a nearby village who burned her floorboards one by one. Her family slept on dirt for the last month of winter. One night, she burned the last plank and the rats came up through the floor. They say she didn't even scream. You don't know if it's true, but you believe it because you're burning things now, too. Memories, history, comfort, piece by piece, not because you want to, but because the fire demands it. And in the silence of midnight, when the fire shrinks again and the cold returns, you don't think about the furniture. You think about the walls. You think about how long they'll last. You hear the cough before you open your eyes. It's sharp, dry, hollow, not loud, but full of warning. The kind of sound that settles in the bones long before it settles in the lungs. You lie still, staring up at the dark rafters, waiting for the next one. You count the seconds in your head. 1, 2, 3, another cough. Then a small whimper. You swing your legs off the side of the bed, feet meeting cold stone. The fire is nearly out again, just a dull red glow, barely enough to light the room, much less warm it. You walk toward the sound. Your daughter is curled up on a straw mat near the hearth, her small frame wrapped in 2 wool blankets. Her face is damp, pale, but her cheeks glow unnaturally red, like coals buried under ash. She looks up as you kneel beside her. "I'm fine," she croaks, but she's not. You touch her forehead. It's burning. Her skin is so hot it startles you, yet her hands are cold, not cool, ice cold. Her fingernails have a purple tint, her lips, too. You pull another blanket from the bed and wrap her tighter. You press her to your chest, as if your warmth can undo the damage, but you know better. This is how it starts, always in winter, always quietly. It might begin with a sniffle, a cough, a small fever, but in a house where the walls breathe cold and the air never stops moving. Illness doesn't come and go, it settles in, it moves in, and once it's inside, it spreads. You remember last winter, the neighbor's boy, same age. He caught a cold around New Year's. By Epiphany, he was coughing blood. By the feast of St. Agnes, he was gone. They had to keep his body in the barn until spring. The ground was too hard to dig. You pray you won't have to make the same decision. You go to the shelf and take down your pathetic excuse for a medicine chest. 2 small cloth bundles of herbs, dried yarrow and thyme, and a jar of honey so crystallized it needs to be carved out with a spoon. You set water to boil. Historians talk about how medical knowledge in the Middle Ages was rudimentary. That's putting it kindly. You've heard of humors and bloodletting and balancing the spleen. All you really know is that warm broth, sleep, and prayers are your only reliable tools. You crush the herbs, mix them with the honey, and stir the mess into a cup of steaming water. You bring it to her lips and help her sip. Her eyes flutter, and she leans into your arm. She doesn't resist. That's what scares you most. Your partner wakes behind you. Their voice is hoarse, deeper than usual. They don't even comment. Just move to stoke the fire and check the goat. They've been coughing too. Everyone is, because when one person gets sick in a medieval household, the rest follow fast. No one can isolate. There's no spare room, no medicine, no hospital. Just shared air and shared blankets and shared fate. The boy in the next house lost his grandmother last week. They say she just slipped away in her sleep. They say that every winter. It's how death is described when people can't afford to make a fuss. You don't let yourself imagine the worst. Not yet. But you do notice your daughter's breathing, shallow, short, almost like she's whispering with each breath. You feed the fire, again, too much, but you don't care. The last piece of the bench goes in. You hear it crackle as the legs burn. You used to sit on that bench every Sunday. Now it's just heat. You've brought the goat inside. It smells, but its breath warms the room. The chickens are in the corner, under an old blanket. The walls leak cold like a broken jar leaks water. You plug the gaps with rags, then stuff straw in between the stones. It helps. A little quirky fact? In some parts of Europe, during the depths of winter, entire families would sleep in the same bed, not just for comfort, but to cool body heat and ward off illness. That's your reality now. Everyone sleeps huddled. You can't remember the last night you had space to stretch. You sit beside your daughter and stroke her hair, whispering old nursery rhymes, not because you think they help, but because silence is worse. Outside, the wind groans like a church bell dragged through snow. Inside, the cottage smells of damp wood, goat sweat, and sickness. Your own throat is raw now. You tell yourself it's from the smoke, from the cold, but you know the signs. You've lit a candle, not for light, but for comfort. It flickers wildly. The flame bends toward the wall. There's a draft again. The house is full of them. You can't block them all. Your daughter coughs again. She winces. You can see how much it hurts her. You squeeze her hand. And she smiles, faintly. You can't stop watching her, can't stop counting the seconds between each breath. You try to keep feeding her small spoonfuls of warm broth, but she turns her face away. She's too tired. You place the cup down and tuck the blankets tighter. Your partner returns with more firewood, just twigs and a few branches. It'll have to do. They sit beside you. No words, just shared fear. You think about the graves, about digging through frost, about how death in winter is slow and quiet and lonely. Some say that souls freeze in the earth when buried in cold ground, unable to rise until thaw. It's superstition, but it feels true. Everything feels frozen now, even time. The girl sleeps, restless. Her breath wheezes. You wipe her forehead, murmur nonsense to soothe her. You've run out of prayers. You say them anyway. Tomorrow, if she's better, you'll boil water again. You'll burn more things. You'll crush more herbs. You'll carry her outside for a moment of sun if the sky clears. But if she's worse, no, not yet. Not tonight. Tonight, she's here. Warmed by the fire made from your last bench, surrounded by goats and blankets and people who love her. Tonight, the sickness hasn't won, not yet. There's a kind of silence in deep winter that you never really get used to. Not the quiet of a sleeping house, or of snow falling gently on the roof. This is different. It's the silence of no one knocking anymore, and the silence inside you when you realize you're glad. You didn't start the season like this. No one does. In October, when the wind first turns sharp and the nights stretch long, people still smile at each other in the lane. They still trade apples for onions, wool for salt. They still check in, but by February, that warmth is gone. Now, when you pass someone on the road, and only if you absolutely must pass someone, you keep your eyes down. You don't greet them. You don't ask how they're doing because you already know. They're cold, they're hungry, they're tired, and they want something you probably can't spare. That's what it always comes down to in winter, what you can afford to lose. And this year, you can't afford to lose much. You used to keep an extra blanket folded by the door, just in case someone came calling late at night. You've burned it now, along with the chair beside it, and the stool it sat on. Now, there's just ash. Last week, Marta came knocking. You heard her before you saw her. Footsteps crunching the snow. Then a weak tap on the door. Not urgent, not panicked, just tired. You knew it was her. You also knew she'd been seen begging at Jakob's the day before, asking for bread, asking for honey. He didn't have any, or said he didn't. Now she was here. You sat still. Your partner looked at you. You looked at the door. No one moved. Another knock. Then silence. You waited. 10 long breaths. The kind of breaths that fog the air in front of your face, even inside the house. Then, slowly, the footsteps faded. You told yourself, she'll be all right. She has family. She'll find help somewhere else. But that was a lie. Everyone knows Marta's alone. Her sons died 2 winters ago. Her husband before that. And now? Now. She's one of those names people say in whispers. Have you seen Marta? Not lately. Maybe she went to stay with her cousin. She didn't. She just stopped knocking, and you let her. Historians write about the communal spirit of medieval life, the shared ovens, the feast days, the barns built together, the harvests reaped side by side. But they don't write as much about what happened after the harvest, when the food was stored, when the doors closed, when everyone became a keeper of their own fire and nothing else. There's a reason why kindness doesn't last in winter, because kindness doesn't burn. You can't feed it to the hearth, can't wrap it around your children at night, can't boil soup in it. You tried. Early on, when Jakob's youngest had a cough, you sent over some dried mint and a small pot of honey. You told yourself it was the right thing. A week later, your daughter had a fever. You burned half your wood just keeping her warm enough to breathe. You held her hands all night and prayed to saints you didn't even believe in. She survived, but something in you didn't. You never sent honey again. Quirky fact? In certain mountain villages, it was once customary to nail a sprig of holly above your door in December, a sign that you were open to visitors, ready to share. But in some years, during hard winters, the holly was removed quietly, no explanation, no shame, just gone. You never hung any to begin with. Your partner used to argue with you. If we stop helping people, what do we become? You don't argue anymore. You both know the answer. You become someone who still has firewood in March. And that, in the end, might be the only thing that matters. The hardest part, you still feel it. That twist in your gut when someone knocks. That ache in your chest when you think of Marta's hands, blue with cold. You're not cruel. You're just afraid. Afraid that the next kindness will be the one that takes everything. That the next bowl of broth you give away will mean no dinner for your own. That opening the door once means never closing it again. Because need is endless in winter. It doesn't thank you. It just asks for more. Jakob told you a story once. Back when things were warmer, a man gave away his last blanket to a traveler on the road. That night, his child died in his sleep. They say the man never gave anything away again. You used to think that was sad. Now you wonder if it was wise. This morning, you saw smoke rising from Bram's chimney again. First time in over a week. You're not sure what he's burning. Probably books, maybe floorboards. But the smoke was real, and that means he's still alive. You watched it for a long time, not because you were glad, though you were, but because you wondered what it would take for someone else to watch smoke from your chimney, and whether they'd be relieved or resentful, because that's the final truth. In the heart of winter, fire means survival, and survival breeds envy. You know that if the village turns desperate enough, they'll come, not to ask, but to take. And so, you've stopped lighting your fire at dusk. You wait till after dark now, when no one can see the glow through your shutters. You keep the fire low, quiet, invisible. You whisper instead of speak. You guard your warmth like it's a secret, because it is. You've become the kind of person who watches people freeze, just to protect a flame. And no matter how many times you tell yourself it's necessary, that it's justified, that you'll make it right in the spring, there's a part of you that never really warms again. Not even when the snow finally melts. Not even when the birds return. Not even when the door swings open once more and you step out into the sun. Because kindness doesn't burn. It doesn't arrive with a scream or a crash. No lightning splits the sky. No thunder roars in warning. It starts with a silence. A stillness in the air so deep that even the fire seems to burn quieter, as if nature itself is holding its breath. Then you hear it. Faint at first, almost like sand slipping through fingers, but heavier, slower. Snow falling fast. You rise from your cot, wrap yourself in the heaviest thing you can find, an old wool cloak, stiff with damp, and push open the door. It resists. Snow already presses against it from the outside. You force it with your shoulder and peer into the dark. The world is gone, all of it. Just a swirling wall of white. The barn disappeared. The path to the well vanished. The fields, the trees, the hills, they're not hidden. They've been erased, and that's how it begins. The great blizzard, the kind they talk about years later in hushed voices, the kind that leaves no footprints, because no one walks through it and survives. You shut the door and bar it, not in panic, but with the calm of someone who knows nothing can be done. You've seen storms. You know this one's different. It's not just weather, it's a season with teeth. You move fast. Wake your partner. Pull the children closer to the fire. Rearrange the furniture so no one's near the outside walls. Cold will come through those first. Then the ceiling beams. Then, if it gets bad enough, the door itself will freeze shut. Your partner goes out once more, rope tied around their waist. They're only going as far as the woodshed, but in this, 10 paces is a journey. You hold the rope like it's their lifeline, because it is. You feel it go taut, then slack, then nothing. You count 10, 20, 30, then tug. Relief floods your chest. You brace yourself as the door opens again, and your partner stumbles in with a sack of half-frozen firewood and snow in their eyelashes. Their hands are numb. You help them remove their boots, set the wood by the fire, and both of you sit down without a word. What's there to say? The wind outside is screaming now, not a metaphor, not poetic. It howls. It shrieks down chimneys and claws at shutters like a living thing. And worse still, it gets in, even here, in your patched-together cottage. You feel it sneaking under doors, along cracks in the window frame, through the spaces where stone meets wood. You'd sealed every gap you could, it doesn't matter. The blizzard always finds a way in. Historians might write of harsh winters and severe cold events, but that doesn't come close to capturing what you feel now, the creeping fear that the world has turned against you, and that it will not stop until it takes everything. You check the roof every few minutes, not because you expect to fix anything, but because if it starts to sag, you want to know before it falls in. The rafters groan. The weight of snow is building. You hear little pops, wood flexing under strain. Last time it got this bad, the neighbor's roof caved in while they were sleeping. They barely escaped. The grandmother didn't. They found her in the ashes weeks later. You try not to think of that. Instead, you tend the fire, feed it constantly. Every scrap of burnable material goes in, a broken stool leg, a warped pan handle, even a bit of straw from the mattress. You're not thinking about tomorrow, only the next hour. You spoon out a thin broth, more water than anything else, and give it to the children. They eat in silence, not because they're scared, but because silence has become their normal. They know storms mean hunger. They know the animals might not make it. The goat stopped bleeding this morning. You tried not to notice. The chickens are huddled in a box in the corner, feathers puffed like little clouds. Their breath steams in the cold. You toss them a few grains, not much. You can't spare much. Quirky fact? In parts of Eastern Europe, people would dig tunnels in the snow between buildings just to survive blizzards. Entire villages connected by frozen hallways. It sounds clever until you realize the snow must be deep enough to bury a house to make that work. Your house isn't buried, not yet, but it will be. By morning, the snow will reach the windows, maybe higher, and once that happens, you'll be sealed in. No air, no light, no rescue. Your partner starts building a vent shaft through the roof with a broom handle and a prayer. If it works, you might still breathe. If it collapses, well, you won't. You lie down beside the fire with your arms around the children. Their breathing is slow, not peaceful, just exhausted. You listen to the storm. You wonder if this is what drowning in air sounds like. And time stretches. Hours pass. Or maybe they don't. Maybe time itself is frozen too. You drift in and out of sleep. Dream of warmth, of summer hay and bees and bread fresh from the oven. But when you wake, the wind still screams. The world is still gone. No sun, no dawn, just white pressing against the windows like a giant, soft hand. Your partner lights a candle, not for warmth, but to prove the darkness hasn't won. The little flame flickers, brave and ridiculous. You smile, because sometimes ridiculous is all you have. You whisper stories to the children. Tell them the storm is a dragon, and your home is a castle, and the fire is a shield of light. They smile. One of them even giggles. That small sound. In the middle of all this, more powerful than any fire, the roof groans again, but it holds. You add another log. You breathe deep. You hold your family close, and you wait for the storm to pass, because eventually, even this must end. You're not sure how long you've been trapped inside. 3 days? 5? Maybe more. Time isn't measured in hours anymore. It's measured in firewood. 1 log left means you've got a few hours of warmth. 2 logs, and you allow yourself to relax. 3, you're rich. You used to be rich. Now you count in slivers. The blizzard is over, but it's like waking up inside a tomb. Snow has sealed the door from the outside, packed so tightly into every seam that even the cold has taken on weight. Your shutters no longer open. Light filters in dimly through cracks, but barely enough to tell night from day. And still, you're waiting for a sound, any sound, a bird, a drip, a voice. But all you hear is your own stomach. Hunger is no longer sharp, it's slow now, numb. It settles into your bones and sits there, humming like a second heartbeat. You gave the children the last bit of broth yesterday. What passed for broth? Anyway, mostly melted snow, with the last shreds of turnip floating like ghosts. You told them it would make them strong. You even smiled. They didn't smile back. They're too tired to pretend anymore. Your partner hasn't spoken since dawn. They're sitting by the hearth, staring at the embers as if watching a performance. You know what they're thinking. You're thinking it too. It's not the hunger that scares you most, not the cold, not even the roof creaking above your head. It's the quiet. Because in this kind of silence, you start to forget what the world sounds like. You start to forget your own voice, your own name. You look in the mirror and barely recognize yourself. Gaunt face, cracked lips, eyes sunken deeper every day. You still remember autumn, apples, wool fairs, the sound of goats in the field, bread with actual crust. That memory feels like someone else's life. The snow has claimed your doorway. You tried to dig through it the first day after the storm, but the snow was too dense, like compacted chalk. You gave up after your fingers went numb. You tried the window. 2, jammed shut. You cracked the glass trying to pry it open. Now there's a breeze there, one you can't stop. Every night, the house gets colder, not all at once, but steadily. 1 brick colder, 1 breath colder, 1 candle colder. You can feel the frost forming inside the walls, on the underside of the rafters, on your own eyelashes. The goat died 2 nights ago. You found her lying on her side, stiff as a beam. You didn't have the heart to tell the children. You just covered her with old sacks and closed the barn door. You used to name your animals. Now, you don't even say their names out loud. It's easier that way. One of the chickens is still alive. Somehow, you're not sure how long it'll last. You're not even sure whether you hope it survives. Because part of you has started measuring things differently. Not in days or health or kindness, but in meat. You catch yourself thinking things you never would have a month ago. You look at the last bag of oats and wonder what would happen if you boiled them with water and bits of wool. You know it won't feed you, but it might distract you. Historians still argue whether the great winters of the early 14th century truly triggered mass famine across Europe, or whether poor planning was to blame. But they never talk about this part, this frozen space between starvation and survival, where you're not dying yet, but you're no longer living either. You've crossed that threshold now. This morning, your partner found an old bit of dried leather in the loft. They boiled it for 3 hours. You chewed it for 10 minutes before you realized it wasn't softening. It didn't matter. You swallowed anyway. The children cried in their sleep last night, not from fear, from pain. Their stomachs have started cramping. You have nothing left to give them. You sit by the fire, what's left of it, and feed it the broken handle of a broom. That broom used to sweep this floor. Now it's your warmth. You wonder what's left in the house you haven't burned. Not much. You eye the legs of the table, the edge of a shelf, the very walls. You tell yourself you won't go that far, but deep down, you know you will. Quirky fact: in some remote villages, it was tradition to bake survival cakes in November. Dense loaves filled with dried beans, lard, and anything that could keep. Families were told to hide them under the floorboards. For the day the sky turns white and won't come back. You didn't bake any. You didn't know. Your partner says something. Finally, you don't catch it at first. You ask them to repeat. I think we need to dig. You both look at the door, then at your hands. You've already tried. You remember the sting of cold on your skin, the way your fingers stopped working. But now, something feels different. Not hope, exactly, just desperation with new boots on. So you start, you take turns, scooping with a cracked bowl, then with your bare hands, then with a ladle, anything. The snow pushes back, but little by little, the wall thins. You can feel air, not warm, not clean, but moving. You keep digging, one breath at a time, one scoop at a time, and maybe, just maybe, beneath all this white, something like the world still exists. You don't wake up all at once. It's like thawing, slow, disorienting. First, you hear the wind, or rather, you don't. The silence is different now. It's not the screaming gale that rattled the roof beams and howled down the chimney. This is soft, muffled, as if the storm itself has died and the snow is holding its breath. You crack open your eyes. The room is pale, not bright, just less dark. You blink. Twice. The window is glowing faintly, a dull blue haze behind the frost. Then it hits you. The storm is over. You sit up too fast. Your body protests, bones aching, muscles tight, breath shallow from sleeping in the cold too long. But it doesn't matter. You stand. Your knees almost buckle. But you make your way to the door. The handle is frozen stiff. You press, shove, lean your full weight. Nothing. You expected that. It's buried. You call your partner. Voice hoarse and dry. They rise slowly, eyes groggy, face thinner than it was 2 days ago, maybe 3, maybe more. No one's kept count. You dig with your hands first, then with the ladle, then the cracked bowl. Snow isn't soft anymore. It's packed, like crushed rock. Each scoop takes strength you barely have. But slowly, painfully, the wall begins to thin. You feel a draft, cold, but real. And beneath that, air, moving air. You gasp. The children stir. One begins to cough. You finally break through. A hole the size of your head, then wider, enough to stick your shoulders through. You blink against the light. And for a moment, you can't process what you're seeing. The world is white, not snowy, not a nice dusting, not a thick winter coat. This is obliteration. Everything you remember, the road, the fences, the shed, the stream, gone. The barn has become a vague hump. Your neighbor's house is no longer visible at all, just curves, smooth, soft, deadly. Snow is piled higher than a man stands. It stretches in every direction, an ocean made of cold. You call for your partner. Together. You widen the tunnel. You clear a space big enough for the children. You lift them through one by one, hands trembling. You're standing in a new world now. One without color, one without edges. It's beautiful, in a way, but terrifying, because beauty doesn't feed you, and snow doesn't forgive. Your first thought isn't survival, it's, are we the only ones left? That fear comes sharp and fast. You look around, desperate for signs of life. Smoke, tracks, a voice, anything. But there's only wind, whistling softly through the white. You make a decision. You can't stay. Not here. Not without wood. Not without food. You need people. You need the village. You need the church, even in the worst winters. Someone always ends up at the church. It's stone. It holds heat better. It has height, strength, some kind of spiritual magnetism. If anyone made it through the storm, they'll be there. You gather what you can. The last dry plank, a spoon, a broken knife. Your partner tucks a chicken feather into their sleeve like it might mean something. The children are too weak to walk far, but they try. You tie rags around their feet, wrap them in every scrap of wool you haven't burned. Then, you begin the crawl. Yes, crawl because the snow is too deep to walk. Your legs sink to the thigh, then the hip. You find yourself inching forward on hands and knees, dragging your weight across a surface that groans with each movement. Every few steps, someone falls. You take turns pulling each other out. You rest every 10 paces. You count out loud to keep from going silent. The climb to the hill takes over an hour. It should have taken 10 minutes. Your breath fogs the air in thick clouds. Your fingers stop feeling anything halfway up. You can't tell if they're frostbitten. You just keep going. Finally, you see it. The steeple. Not the full thing, just the tip, peeking above the drift, like a gravestone. Then the roof. Then the bell tower. Then the doors. One is slightly ajar, not wide, just enough. You approach slowly, you knock, even though you know it's pointless. Then you push. It opens, and the warmth, thin, smoky, real, greets you like a long-lost sibling. You step inside, and they are there, not many, a dozen, maybe, huddled near a fire made of pew legs and broken hymnals, faces hollow, eyes wide, blankets over shoulders, boots off, feet steaming. Jakob is the first to see you. His face cracks, then breaks into something halfway between relief and apology. You made it, he whispers. You nod. You sit. You unwrap the children. One of them starts crying. No one scolds them. No one says anything for a long time. Then someone passes you a bowl, lukewarm snow melt with bark chips. You drink it anyway, It tastes like hope. Your partner offers up what you've brought: one spoon, one piece of wood, one memory of a better day. And it's enough, because here, enough is everything. Quirky fact: in some parts of medieval Europe, after every hard winter, villagers would gather for a ceremony called the reckoning. They'd count who survived, who was lost, and light a candle for each chimney still standing. You don't know who started that, but you understand why, because today, in this church, you feel it too. The need to remember, the need to whisper names, the need to begin again. You sit together, side by side, watching the fire dance on stone. The storm is over, but winter isn't. You're still cold, you're still hungry, you're still afraid, but you're not alone. And for now, that's all that matters. You wake up to coughing, not yours this time. Deep, ragged, wet, the kind that doesn't get better. You open your eyes to the flicker of firelight, weak and low, a few embers barely glowing under blackened wood. The stone floor beneath you has gone from cold to bone deep. You feel it in your spine, in your joints, in that place behind your eyes where headaches form. Your cloak slipped off during the night. You don't know how long it's been gone. You reach for it, pull it close. It's stiff, soaked in days of smoke and snowmelt. Still, it's better than nothing. Your children are curled beside you like little cats. Too thin, too quiet. One of them has started coughing, too. You pray it's just the cold, not the cough Thomas has. Thomas lies 3 pews away. You can hear every wheeze, every failed breath. He hasn't stood in 2 days. Someone gave him broth yesterday, if you could even call it that. Melted snow with bark and 1 potato peel. He couldn't swallow it. Jakob says he's fading. You already knew that. You sit up slowly. Your body protests. Every movement scraping like rust. You count the others in the room. 13 now? You used to be 14. Old Maren passed during the second night in the church. Quietly. No one noticed at first. They wrapped her in her own blanket and laid her in the back. No one talked about burying her. There's no ground left for burying. Jakob rises, rubbing his hands together. Frost puffs off his sleeves like flour. He doesn't speak loudly, doesn't need to. The silence does the work for him. We've got food for maybe 2 more days, he says, gesturing to the cloth bundle near the altar. If we ration tightly. Everyone nods. Everyone looks away. No one wants to ask the next question out loud, but it's sitting there between you, thick and undeniable. Who won't get to eat? Your partner stands beside you, clutching your child's hand. You see the way they glance at the food, then at Thomas, then quickly down. You know that look. It's not cruelty, it's calculation. It's the same math running through your head. 14 mouths, now 13. Thomas barely counts. But even so, the food is going to run out. You volunteer to help dig again. Anything to be moving. Anything to distract your body and your mind. You and Jakob set off toward what used to be a neighbor's storage shed, half swallowed by the snowdrift behind the church. The snow is harder now, crusted over. You use a broken plank as a shovel, hacking your way downward in jerking, uncoordinated movements beneath the snow, ice beneath the ice, wood. You hit it with a dull thud, a corner of the shed. Jakob crouches, pries at the boards with the butt of a fire iron. The door gives barely. Inside, darkness and the smell. Rot, the kind that doesn't freeze. You cover your nose and duck in. Jakob lights a stub of candle. It flickers, then steadies. The room is half collapsed. Shelves tipped over. Bags torn open by mice. You dig through what's left. Split grain. Spoiled onions. The skeletal remains of a rabbit that didn't survive the storm either. And then, a miracle, a sealed jar. You hold it up to the light, heart thumping, lard. You unscrew the lid, smell it. It's rancid, but not spoiled, not dangerous. Jakob grins for the first time in days. "We can stretch that," he says. "Boil it, mix it with oats." You find a few handfuls of barley, moth-eaten, but intact. Between the two of you, you carry the haul back like treasure. The others gather as you display your findings on the altar steps. There's no applause, no cheers, just a collective exhale. You bought them one more day, maybe two. But the truth still looms. You can't find what isn't there. Even miracles have limits. That night, you share barley lard porridge by candlelight. It smells awful. It tastes worse, but it's warm. And for 1 hour, no one is crying. No one is coughing. Even Thomas sleeps. You sit by the fire with your partner. Your hands touch. Cold fingers finding each other under the blanket. You don't say it, but you're both thinking the same thing. What happens when the next person dies? You used to recoil from the thought. Now it lingers. It's not hunger that shocks you anymore. It's how normal it's starting to feel. How quiet the death of a neighbor becomes when you're just trying to survive. Historians still argue about how bad the Great Famine truly was. Some claim exaggeration. Regional misfortunes dressed up as continent-wide crisis. But those who lived through it, they didn't argue. They just got quieter, more careful, more honest. The next morning, Thomas is barely breathing. Jakob kneels beside him, says something low we can't hear. Then he stands, turns to the group, and says, flatly, "He won't last another night." No one speaks. You sit frozen, heart thudding, pulse in your throat. We should not waste food on a dying man. There, it's said, it hangs in the air like a blade. Someone whispers, "That's not our decision," Jakob says. "It is now." You feel your partner's hand tense around yours. Your child stirs in your lap, hungry, always hungry. You understand what Jakob's doing. You don't even disagree, but it still tears something inside you to agree silently. You look at Thomas. His lips are cracked. His eyes flutter. You wonder if he knows. You hope he doesn't. That night, he doesn't get broth. That night, no one mentions it. That night, everyone sleeps. And in the morning, he's gone. Just gone. Jakob closes his eyes, crosses Thomas's arms, covers him with a cloak. Someone starts crying quietly. You don't know if it's grief, or guilt, or relief. Maybe all three. You hold your child close, and you tell yourself, "We're one day closer to spring." You repeat it like a prayer, even if you don't believe it. You've stopped counting the days. Maybe it's been 2 weeks since the storm, maybe more. The world outside is still white, but inside, the color has drained from everything else, from faces, from hope, from time. You wake up slower now, not from sleep. Exactly. Sleep has become something else, less a rest, more a retreat. You wake because your body forces you to, because your hip hurts on the hard floor, because the cold won't let you stay under. This morning, your eyes open to smoke, not the heavy kind from burning fresh wood, but that thin, sour haze of damp bark and old straw. Someone's burning the last of the choir rail. Your child lies beside you, curled like a comma. One hand stretches toward your side, fingers twitching in a dream. You pull them close. You don't know what they're dreaming about. You hope it's food. You hope it's summer. You sit up, bones creaking, and scan the space. Thomas is gone. He passed during the night, just like everyone expected. Jakob has already covered his body with what remains of a linen tapestry. Someone put a candle near his feet. You wonder who had the strength to spare a candle. You wonder if it's meant to honor him or ward off the guilt. There's no burial. There won't be one. The ground is still frozen solid, and no one has the energy to dig. The dead stay with you. That's just how it is now. Breakfast is silent. a thin broth ladled from a single shared pot. It's clear with bits of bark and grain at the bottom. There are no questions, no complaints, not even thanks. Just slurping and chewing and silence. The broth tastes like smoke and desperation. Still, you drink it. Jakob announces the day's goal, the old granary behind the rectory. It's one of the last buildings no one has searched thoroughly. The snow collapsed one side of the roof weeks ago. Could be nothing. Could be the difference between living and not. You volunteer. You don't hesitate. Not because you feel strong. You don't, but because the thought of sitting still inside this church another day makes something inside you itch. You need to move, to try. Even if it's just swinging a broken pew leg at ice. Pretending it means something. Your partner joins you. You dress in silence. Wrap your feet in extra wool. Tug on your gloves. You each take a stick. Nothing fancy. Just something that can break snow. You step outside. The cold greets you like an old enemy. Familiar. Biting. Unwelcome. The sky is gray. Heavy with more snow that hasn't yet fallen. Every breath feels like swallowing needles. The walk to the granary takes twice as long as it should. Snowdrifts reach your thighs in some places. You use the same path the last burial party carved when they carried old Marin's body out last week. Before the snow refilled it, the building slouches under the weight of winter. One side has given way, its roofline broken and warped. The door is iced shut. You chip at it with the pew leg, striking rhythmically until the latch breaks loose and the door creaks open. Inside, darkness. You wait for your eyes to adjust, then you step in. The smell hits first, dust, rot, mold, and something else, oil. You feel your heart twitch in your chest. There's a shelf near the far wall, half collapsed under the weight of snow that leaked through the ceiling. On it, a sack, barely a third full, of oats. Next to it, a cloudy jar with yellow oil still sealed inside. You stare. Then you call to your partner. They step in, eyes wide, and you both just stand there for a moment, marveling like children seeing gold for the first time. You test the oats with your fingers. Mice have nibbled the edges, but the middle is dry, still usable. The oil smells slightly rancid, but it hasn't separated, still pourable, still fuel, still food. You carry it back between the two of you like you're holding a treasure chest, back at the church. The sight stuns everyone into silence. Jakob inspects it, turning the jar in the firelight like a rare relic. "It'll stretch, yo," he says. "We'll make cakes. A little oil goes a long way." And for the first time in a week, you see something new in people's faces, hunger and hope at the same time. They make the cakes that afternoon. You help crush the oats, mix the oil, a bit of melted snow, a pinch of salt someone saved from weeks ago. You shape the mash into little discs and fry them in an iron pan over what's left of the choir stall. The smell is intoxicating, not pleasant, not exactly, but real. Real food, real calories, real warmth. You distribute them slowly, no seconds. Everyone gets one, even the children, even the weak, even Marta. She hasn't spoken since the day before. Her cheeks are sunken, lips pale. She watches the frying cakes with dull, glassy eyes. You press one into her hand gently. She doesn't smile. She just holds it, like she's afraid it'll vanish. That night, the room is quiet in a different way. No one cries, no one groans. You hear breathing, calm, steady. You fall asleep holding your child, their belly. Finally, blessedly, not hollow. And then the morning shatters it. Marta collapses. She'd risen to go relieve herself behind the altar curtain. You'd watched her get up, slow but steady. Then a sound, like fabric crumpling, and she was down. You run to her. Her skin is cold, Her eyes are open but unfocused. She mumbles something, but you can't understand. Jakob comes, checks her breath. It's there, but shallow. She's slipping, he says. That's what they call it now. Slipping, not dying, not failing, just slipping away. You sit beside her for hours, holding her hand, talking, even though she doesn't respond. You tell her about spring, about sunlight on water, about children laughing and cherries in June. She doesn't move. Jakob meets your eyes across the room. He doesn't say it. He doesn't need to. Tomorrow. If she's still like this, she won't eat. You'll all pretend it's merciful, but really, it's math. That night, you can't sleep, not because of the cold, not because of hunger, but because you realize you no longer know where the line is, between survival and cruelty, between choice and necessity, between you and whoever you were before the snow came. You reach over and hold your child close, and as the fire dies again into flickering shadows, you whisper, not to anyone, not to God, not even to yourself, just into the dark. One more day. You wake up with a sense that something is different, not better, but shifted. The church is quiet, like always, but not the suffocating kind. More like the silence of people waiting, watching, holding their breath. Your child is still asleep beside you, mouth slightly open, face slack in dreams. You press your fingers gently to their cheek. Warm, barely, but warm enough. Across the nave, you spot Marta, still breathing, but unmoved. She hasn't spoken since yesterday. Her body curled like a ribbon on the floor, unmoving, her eyes half closed, her chest rising and falling in those fragile, too slow waves. She didn't eat last night, not because food ran out miraculously. You still had enough bark mash to go around, but she couldn't swallow. Your partner tried, coaxed her, even held the bowl to her lips. She just turned her head away. Jakob had said nothing, but you saw the decision flicker across his face. One more day. Now that day has arrived. You sit up. Your back cracks like firewood. The blanket slips from your shoulders. Cold air greets you like an old punishment. Your partner's already awake, crouched by the hearth, coaxing flame from nothing. The last of the splinters burn fast, too fast. You'll need more wood again today, another bench, another hymn book. It doesn't matter anymore what you burn, only that it burns. Jakob rises, stretching stiff joints. He barely looks like himself these days, hollowed out, face sallow, eyes sunk into his skull like burned candles. But he still moves, still leads, still calculates. Today, he says, someone needs to check the southern cottages. Most were abandoned weeks ago, when the first big snow hit. Some families fled before the storm. No one knows if they made it, or if the wind took them like it took so many. But no one's gone back to check since. It's dangerous, nearly a mile away. No cover from wind. Risk of getting lost in the white. But if there's anything there, grain, candles, meat, it could change everything, you say. I'll go. Your voice cracks as you speak. You haven't talked much lately. Nobody has. Your child hears you, sits up slowly. Their eyes are wide, half from sleep, half from fear. Don't go, they whisper. I have to. You reply, gently. We need more food. You kiss their forehead. Their skin feels thinner than it used to. You and Jakob prepare in silence. You wrap wool rags around your boots, reinforce the sled made from pew planks and curtain cords. You take a broken candle with you, not for light, but to feel like you're carrying fire into the unknown. The walk is brutal. The wind has died down. But the cold is mean today, sharp and brittle, like stepping through shattered glass. You move across hardened snow crust, thankful it holds your weight. Each breath stings. You learn to exhale through a scarf. to keep your nose from freezing. The cottages appear slowly, like ghosts. Dark roofs barely visible above the drifts. Windows blown out, doors cracked open like mouths frozen mid-scream. The first house is empty, just cold and dust. A broken table, a cradle with nothing in it. The second house still has shoes near the hearth, but no people, no food, only ash. You almost give up at the third. The roof is caved in, one wall completely fallen under a heap of snow. You pause, look at Jakob. He shrugs. We're here. You climb over the rubble. Inside, the air smells wrong. Damp wood, rot, mouse droppings, and something else. But tucked behind a shelf, behind a collapsed ceiling beam, you spot it. A jar, amber, thick, glinting faintly in the gray light. Madong, honey. You hold it up. Jacob squints, blinks, then actually laughs. A thin, wheezing bark of disbelief. Beside it, you find a bag of peas, rock hard, but whole, a sausage, dried and shriveled to the size of your fist, but intact. You don't stop to think. You take everything, even a bundle of rags someone left behind. They're dry. They'll help. The way back feels lighter, even with the sled creaking under the weight of your find. Your steps feel stronger. The cold doesn't bite quite so hard. You're not foolish. You know this doesn't save anyone. But for the first time in days, you carry more than food. You carry possibility. Back at the church, the others gather fast. The sight of the honey draws them like moths to flame. The sausage is passed hand to hand. The peas counted like coins. But the honey, that's what holds them in silence. It's real, Jacob says, unopened. It feels ceremonial, sacred, like finding summer in a jar. You portion it carefully, one bark cake for each person, pressed with a finger of golden sweetness. Children first, then the weakest, then the rest. When it's Marta's turn, you kneel beside her. She hasn't moved in hours, but you lift her head gently, place the bark near her lips. She doesn't resist. She licks once, then again, and then her lips part. Sweet, she murmurs. One word, barely a whisper, but enough to make the room freeze. Not with cold, with hope. You hear someone start to cry. Not loud, just a small, shaking sob. You can't tell if it's joy or grief, maybe both. That night, no one dies. You eat the last of the sausage, boiled with peas and snow water. It's the best thing you've tasted all winter. And for a few hours, no one talks about rationing. No one looks at Jakob for hard decisions. No one weighs lives in silence. You sleep beside your child, your partner's hand tucked into yours, and your dreams come back. Not good ones. Not exactly, but different. You dream of bees, of flowers, of the sound of spring water running over stone. You dream of sunlight. You dream of color. And when you wake, you realize you've forgotten what green looks like. But you also realize something else. You're still alive. Marta is too. And maybe, just maybe, that means spring will come after all. The next morning arrives gently. No shrieking wind. No snow crashing off the eaves. No coughing fits in the dark. Just pale morning light filtering through frosted glass, catching in the curls of smoke rising from the last of the firewood. You sit up slowly, unsure at first if you're awake or still drifting in the memory of your dream, the one with the bees, the sun, the sound of thawing rivers. Your child is still asleep beside you, wrapped in that tapestry someone tore from the church wall 2 weeks ago. Their cheek is pink, not flushed, not fevered, just pink color. That's how you know something is shifting. Even the air smells different, not fresh. Exactly, but less stale, less like hunger. Marta is awake, too. You catch her stirring beneath her blanket, sitting upright with effort, reaching for a cup of snow melt with trembling fingers. Jakob rushes to help her. And for the first time since Thomas died, his voice lifts when he speaks. "She's back," he says. "She came back." Someone laughs, a real laugh, not hollow or sarcastic. You look up and realize it's your partner. You don't remember the last time you heard that sound. It doesn't mean everything is fine. You're still out of oil, still low on wood. The bark mash is almost gone. There's still a dead man covered by the altar, waiting for spring thaw. But today, no one talks about dying. Today, someone remembers a recipe for honey and rye cakes. Someone else talks about planting peas in May. You hear the word next season tossed out casually, like it's not just a dream. You go outside with Jakob to search for more dry branches. The air bites your skin, but something's different. You tilt your face up, and you can feel it, barely, faintly, the sun. Still hidden, still weak, but present. The snow has stopped falling. More importantly, it's melting. Not much, just the thin layer near the walls, but enough to see cracks in the crust, enough to see mud beneath the white. You stare at it longer than you should. Dirt. You've never been so happy to see dirt. You come back inside with arms full of sticks and boots coated in slush. Everyone notices. A few people stand. Others come to the doorway, blinking against the brightness. The children laugh. That laugh again, high, startled, real. They kick at the snow like it's a game again, not a prison. You pass out the last of the bread mash that afternoon. No one complains. Instead, Marta says, "Next time, we'll mix in berries." No one corrects her. No one reminds her you don't have any berries, because next time, if there is one, you will. Historians argue about whether spring ever really arrived in those years, or whether it came in fits and false starts. Snow in May, frost in June. They dig in pollen cores and tree rings to measure how cruel the little ice age really was. But they weren't here. They didn't hold their child in a frozen church and whisper, "Just one more day," like it was a holy chant. They didn't count honey drops or break hymnals to burn. They didn't feel the sun and cry from the sheer warmth of it. Tonight, the fire burns a little brighter. It's small, still weak, but no longer a symbol of desperation. Now, it's a promise. Tomorrow, you'll search the hills, find more food, more wood, maybe even survivors. Tomorrow, the church won't feel like a tomb. Tomorrow, your child might ask about strawberries again. And this time, when they do, you'll smile, because spring is still far, but it's coming. You can smell it in the air. You can hear it in the trickle of thaw. You can feel it, finally, in your bones, and for the first time in what feels like forever. You believe that you might live long enough to see it. So now, as the last fire flickers in the church and the snow sighs quietly outside, you ease back into your blankets. You're not safe yet, not fully, but the weight pressing down on your chest is lighter. The silence around you no longer feels like mourning. It feels like rest. You hear the steady breathing of your child, the soft crackle of firewood, the faint hum of wind brushing against stone. The same wind that once brought fear now moves gently, like a lullaby. You stretch your legs. Let your muscles remember the motion of walking, not just through snow, but through fields again someday. You imagine stepping into mud, into grass, into life. The darkness isn't scary anymore. It's soft. It welcomes you. It tells you you've done enough today. So close your eyes now. Let your thoughts slow like melting ice. Let your breath deepen, in and out, like the rhythm of thawing rivers. You've survived winter, maybe just barely, maybe not whole, but here and that, in this world, is more than enough. Let sleep take you gently. Let the cold stay outside. Let the warmth you've earned cradle you, just for tonight. The worst has passed. Spring is coming, and for now, rest. End of story. Sweet dreams.